saying, Fruit Loop? We're having a cat emergency, guys. As you can tell, she hates cat visitors. And we have a couple cat visitors in the yard right now. Anywho, I wanted to come back and do, I was talking about this Turpin family on my last video, and I had cut it off. I meant to pause it when the cat emergency started happening, and I hit the off button by accident. I do that a lot. Anywho, back to the story. So this girl, a couple of the older siblings had cell phones, even though they never went anywhere. They had them in case the parents needed to contact them at home while they were out living their lives and these kids were locked up. And the thing about it is the older children by this point were no longer children. They were adults, but they were so brainwashed and so used to this life that they didn't know any other way of life. And the parents would punish them and withhold food from them and chain them up and punish them if they did not do what they were told to control the younger kids. Because, little children will cry and little children will kind of like throw temper tantrums or whatever. These kids probably weren't. They probably didn't have the strength to, because they were so malnourished. And they had no social skills. They taught each other. Even if you go watch this, I don't know where it's on 2020. Diane Sawyer did the interview with these two girls, or women. And I'm sure you can find it somewhere, maybe in somewhere out there streaming. So this girl at this time, she around the age of 15, she got this phone. She would use it to do Facebook videos and stuff, and she started talking to this one person, and they started telling her, this story you're telling me about your life and the way your family's living is not right. The only time these kids were taken anywhere, they were taken on like vacations, but they were taken with the parents, and it was like a controlled atmosphere. They would put them on display for photo ops, and then they would take them and lock them back up. And the kids were so complacent and so, like, this was just a normal thing to them. This was all they ever knew. But once the girl got the phone and she started watching videos and stuff online, she said, and this is the craziest part. Well, it's not crazy. I mean, this is just the part that kind of like compelled her, to make a change. She started watching Justin Bieber. And I guess, at the time she was 15 or 16 years old, have never really been around boys or anything. She started watching the videos and she thought, this is a cute boy. But she said it was like the things that he was doing in the videos, like riding a bike with his friends and skateboarding and just being out. And they had never known about stuff like that. They didn't know about the world, But when this guy that she was talking to told her, he said, you need to get somebody in there to help your family. It's not right for kids to be put into chains and not fed. And he may have not even have believed her, So one night, the mom tells them, we're moving, we're leaving the next day or the day after, we're leaving, we're going to Oklahoma. Everybody's going to be chained up. This girl, they were so fearful of their parents. Their mother would go into such rages and tantrums that they were fearful for their lives. And the father would too, according to the oldest daughter. So the girl, she was like, it's now or never. If we don't get out of here and get somebody to help us before we leave to go to Oklahoma, they're going to kill us. And I don't know how I don't know. But the girl, they made a plan, the oldest and this one, at that time she was 17. They made a plan that she was going to take her cell phone. They couldn't call out on this phone. They could only use it for Wi-Fi. But 911 would work on the phone. And so she escaped one night after all the kids and the parents were asleep. There was only she took pictures of two of her sisters chained up. They were like 11 and 12 years old. And they looked like little 6-year-old girls. Their wrists and everything were so tiny. They were so thin. She took pictures of them. She asked them, do you mind if I take your pictures? And because the guy had told her, you have to have proof of this, that this is happening, or nobody's going to believe you, So she took pictures, and she took pictures of some of her other siblings, how emaciated they were. And she climbed out of a window one night and took off down the street. And on a surveillance camera from one of the homes across the street, they see her, and they spotlight it. The 2020, when they're running this show, they show her, and the older sister comes outside as well, and she goes in the opposite direction. And when she didn't see her sister, I guess she didn't know which way to go, so she went and ran back inside. She was so scared. They were both so scared, the girls. She said, I didn't even know how to run because I was shaking so bad. But she said she didn't know anything about how to read street signs. She knew what a stop sign was and stuff like that. And they could read because they taught each other. They had books and stuff, but they just helped each other to learn what little bit they could. So she gets down the street, and when she gets far enough away from the house, she calls 911. And of course they replayed the 911 call. And I'm sure this 911 operator thought this is the most bizarre story, She probably thought it was a prank or something. Because the girl's calling, and she's like, starts telling her this story. I just ran away from home because my parents are abusing us. My brothers and sisters are in chains, many of them. We're hungry, we're dirty, we're living in filth. We haven't taken a bath in a year. And this woman, I'm sure this 911 operator is going, this has got to be some crazy lunatic, So she asked her, where are you? Because the phone, she couldn't trace it. And she's saying, do you know what street you live on? And she's like, no, I don't know the streets. And she was asking her, she probably thought this girl was on something, because she asked her if she was taking any medications. And she was like, what is medication? She didn't even know the meaning of that word. And she said, like pills or anything. And the girl says, well, sometimes if we get a cold, we take Robitussin. She was calling it Robitussin. Well, they dispatched a sheriff's deputy. This happened in Riverside. I think it was in Riverside, California. So he's trying to find her, and this 911 operator is trying to help him find her. And she's saying, can you find a street sign or anything that would tell us what street you're on? And she tells her. So she tells her, she said, there's a stop sign here. And she tells her, she said, would you go and stand next to that stop sign until you see the sheriff's car coming? Or the police car. And she was so scared, she said, that she thought her parents were going to discover that she was gone and find her before the police got there. And she didn't want to, she said she was standing in the middle of the street because she didn't know anything about, you weren't supposed to walk in the highway, She didn't know. They had never been taught that. So, cop comes, and from his body cam, this girl, to me, watching her from, like, seeing her for the first time, I would have, and the cop probably did as well, thought she was on meth or something. Because she was so, like, her movements and her body language and her speech pattern, she spoke in a way of, like, she had never really communicated with other people, you know. And the cop asked her, you know, and she shows him the pictures on her phone, and she's telling him, my parents are going to take us to Oklahoma. They're going to chain us all up. I'm afraid my brothers and sisters are going to be killed. So he puts her in the back of his cop car, and he calls, and he reports this. You know, he asked her, can you tell us where the home is located? And she said, well, I could show you. And so the cops all come, and then, of course, you know, you see it from their body cameras as they're going into the home. And they go to the door, and they knock, and nobody comes. They knock, and they knock. And finally, after like 2.5 minutes, the parents come to the door. Well, what had happened was, when they looked out and saw the cop car out there, they ran and they started trying to unchain these kids. And they were able to get to one bedroom and unchain like 3 of the kids and hide those chains. But there was another bedroom. The father had stacked boxes. And he was standing, and what he had done was, before the cops came to the door, he had stacked boxes in front of that door, and he was standing by that door, like, hoping that they wouldn't notice that it had a door there, you know. So, of course, they come into the house, and you see it. It's like, it's a trash dump. There's clothes and boxes and stuff everywhere, and it's just trash. And the cops say that the house smells so strongly of urine and feces and just garbage and just rot. And this was a nice home in a nice suburban neighborhood, you know, on a nice street surrounded by other nice homes. It wasn't like they were out in the hills and the woods hidden away. They were right out in a neighborhood. And they go into the bedroom, they find the little girls. The cop found the 2 little girls that was in the picture. And, of course, their chains had been taken off. And the little boys that were in the other bedroom, they said, this is so sad to even tell. One of the little boys, they said they thought he was around 6 years of age, and he was more like 11 or 12. Had so much lice, his body, his head and everything, and he was chained, so he couldn't even scratch his own lice. So you know that these children were living in pure, like, torture. So they were able to get those kids. Well, I jumped ahead on myself. They found the chains in a closet. The parents had hidden the chains in a closet. But they could see the bruises and the chain marks on their arms. And the 2 little girls the girl had showed the cop the photo of, had the chains on them. And this was only 2 hours later. This happened like 2-3 hours after these pictures were taken. So the chain marks and the bruises were there, but the chains were gone. And one of the kids had kind of like told him, because they were asking the children, do you know where the chains are at? And one of the children pointed to a closet, and they found the chains in the closet. So they get those kids out. They take the parents. So they go back into the living room. At that point, they decide they're going to arrest the parents, put them in the cop car. And it's at that point that they notice the dad standing there with this door. So they say, well, you know, what's back there? And, you know, they ask, you know, stand aside, we're going to go in there. he's asking them, do you have a search warrant? And they say, we don't need a search warrant for a wellness check. That we think that there's a possibility that someone here is in danger and we don't need a warrant. So they go into this room and there's the kids, the boys are chained. That's where they find the one little boy that was so covered in lice and he didn't even have enough room. His chains were so tight that he didn't even have enough room to roll himself over. The doctors, when they finally got all these kids to the hospitals, they had so many. Some of them had heart defects because of the lack of nutrition. They were dehydrated, malnourished. They all were anemic. They were all extremely underweight. They had tooth decay. They were just I don't know. The doctors and the nurses, they took them to different hospitals. But they were just so, they couldn't believe this. They couldn't believe that this happened in a nice suburb in California, Not like out in some foreign country somewhere. And so they finally got them out of the home of the parents and got them some help. But sadly, these kids were the younger ones, and even some of the older kids, because they had never lived on their own. They didn't know how to function. They didn't know how to fill out job applications, or even really, the girl said this was the first time in her entire life that she had ever spoken to another person on the phone, outside of her mom and dad. And they ended up in foster homes. They ended up being awarded, the people raised money for these. People sent donations. Over $600,000 was raised for these kids, this whole group of siblings. And the money, of course, went to a conservator, someone who was appointed by the court, who ended up having these kids placed into foster homes where they were further abused. One was sexually assaulted. They were beaten up, and they were not living in nice Riverside, the nice suburb. They were living in basically what the social workers said was, I hate using the term, but basically they were just living in the hood, That's where they placed them, in these foster homes. These people were getting a couple $100 a month to have these people in their home, whether it was the little 2 and 4-year-olds or the 29-year-old. They were a ward of the court at that point. So even the adult children were put into foster care, in a certain kind of foster care for adults. And they were being abused, and the money was not going to them. It was not going to their health care. It was not going to them. One of the brothers, they only interviewed him from behind, and he only spoke for a few minutes in this story. But he had asked for a bike so that he could get around. And some of them were living in these foster homes, but they were going to soup kitchens and homeless shelters to eat, because the foster families was taking the money and probably using it for their own drug use, and they weren't even feeding these people. So they had starved to death at the hands of their own parents, and then once they got into the foster care system, it was no better. And he had asked the conservator appointed over all this money that had been given to them for a couple of $100 to buy a bike, like a good bike that he could use to get around as transportation, because they didn't know how to drive or nothing. And they wouldn't even give him the money for that. So at this point in the story, 2020 was doing an investigation and trying to interview the judges and the people appointed over these this family and ask them, why are these people being treated this way? Why are these kids, why are these adult practical children mentally and physically, why are they being treated this way? Why are they not being put into a group home together and cared for and allowed to learn and allowed to use that money for their education and retrain them, I guess. I don't know. But you think about it, it's bad enough that these narcissistic psycho parents did this to these kids, and they both got life in prison. But then the state failed them miserably, you know. You take a 29-year-old and a 22-year-old who have never really been outside of their home other than at the control of their parents. They've never really been able to go out to eat. They've never been allowed to go to ball games or school. They don't know anything about the world. And they're thrown into these foster homes, these care homes, where there's probably 10 or 12 other people. And the foster families are just there for the check. They're just there for the government money. So as of right now, I don't know where this stands, but 2020 and had gotten some law enforcement, some lawyers involved, and they were going in there to try to find out why the state was failing these people. The only thing good that did come of it was that the one woman who was appointed as kind of like a guardian over some of the older adults was fired or removed because she was not giving them their money. She was probably spending it herself for her own use. She was the one that turned down this guy when he asked for a couple $100 to buy a good bike, that he could get around on, and she refused. Refused the money that was intended for them. So that just goes to show you that this world is nothing. These people are nothing but it's about greed. It's about greed and abuse. They abuse the children were abused. They were abused by their parents. They were starved to death. They were starved not only for food but for compassion and for human contact. Many of the brothers and sisters, it wasn't like, you imagine your family on a Friday night and everybody's at home and you got brothers and sisters running around, everybody's watching TV and snacking, and it wasn't like that. They were kept in their rooms. They had very little contact with each other except for the roommates that they had. Like the sisters would all be in one room, the brothers. The little bitty kids were all in a different room. And they didn't know who was chained up and who wasn't at any given time, because if one of the kids cried too much or made too much noise or begged for more food, the mother would chain them up. And it's just sad. I mean, it's very sad. Of course, the story itself is sad. But what's even more sad is that the foster system, the government ran these homes and it's a business, People, you hear all the time people talk about become a foster parent. And I think a lot more people would if there was not so much red tape and just the children that so many that need to be in foster homes. Many of them are older children who have already gone through such emotional hell that many of them have psychological problems, and people just don't want to deal with that, and you can't blame them. These kids were so meek and quiet and just did not fight back. They had been taught, or they had it was never anything that they were taught. It was just the way of life that they didn't fight back, because if they cried or if they asked for food or to use the bathroom or to have their chains taken off so they could roll over in bed, they were screamed at and abused even farther. So they didn't fight back. And once they got out into the world and placed in these foster homes where they were being abused and starved, they didn't fight back then either. And sadly, they're still in these homes, unless something has changed since this story ran and people have stepped up and gotten involved. Where's Kim Kardashian? Where are these advocates? Where are all these outspoken celebrities who are so gung-ho to get involved with so much? Where are they at? Why are they not out there in California talking to their great governor that they have and asking him and asking the mayor of that city and asking the foster care and the government and the social workers and raising a hell and going public with this story and putting it on TV and putting it on their TikToks and their Twitters, Why isn't anybody trying to help these people? And the one part of this story is that this girl, this Jordan, the one that escaped and was able to get her family out of there and save her brothers and sisters, she was so smart that she graduated high school in 1 year, having never ever stepped foot inside of a schoolhouse. She graduated in 1 year. She was so intelligent, but it had been starved out of her, At a certain point, none of us, myself and none of you listening to this, hopefully, maybe possibly one person, would ever truly know starvation to the point that your mental health, your mind starts dying, your brain, because of malnutrition. And this was what was happening to these. And she said, I knew that if I didn't get help then, and the doctors even said that some of these children were in such horrible health conditions that they would not have survived a trip in the back of a U-Haul chained up for probably at least what would it be, a full day and maybe 2 full days driving from California to Oklahoma. He said they would not have survived. They would have died inside of those hot trucks. And what would the parents have done? Throw them over a mountain someplace? It's crazy. It's a crazy story, and what's even crazier is that it happened right here in America right now, not 60 or 80 years ago, but right now. I don't know. I'm just perplexed by the whole thing. I didn't mean for these videos to go so long, but I just got it in my head and started talking about it, and I'm just sitting here pondering all this myself, how something like this could happen. And it wasn't like that these parents were, I know they were from West Virginia, but before anybody says, oh, they were a bunch of hillbillies. No, they were both college educated. They met in college. The father was a engineer, worked for Lockheed Martin, which is, the government, is contracts for the government for these big, like, militaries and stuff, and does stuff for the military. He probably, possibly, had to have, like, government clearance, but because of the work that he did. So people knew him. It wasn't like that he was just some guy who worked at a, Taco Bell or something, And the mother, she was just a psychopath. She had what they called, the doctors, of course, the doctors had to come around and evaluate them for court. They said that she had histrionic narcissism, which is a narcissist, but someone who is prone to, like, just outbursts of rage and just over the top screaming and just histrionics, I think I'm saying that right. I might not be. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. If you get a chance, go find that 2020 interview. It may have been an old. I think it was. I think it was current. I think it was a new episode, but it could have been filmed. But this happened in 2018, and so they were talking about 3 years later. These children were still in these foster homes, still wards of the state, still under the control of these conservators or these, assigned social workers or assigned. They weren't even social workers. They were not even trained social workers. They were just in it for the money. They were appointed to be the guardians of these people's care. They never saw them. They were never in contact with them. They were just another number to them, and the money was coming in from the government. Plus, they had control of this big bunch of money that was raised by the American citizens who sent money and donations, thinking that they were going to help buy these kids clothes and shoes and health care and dental work and eyeglasses or whatever they needed. And instead, the money went into like a fund that was controlled by some third party. And of course, they were probably benefiting from it. And that's the world we're living in, people. I don't know. But hopefully there will be updates in the future. This one girl, she's planning on, if they haven't already, I think they were planning on writing a book. They may have been in the process of doing that. So maybe that will help them. And see, these two young women in the story, they're very, the one, like I said, she was so intelligent. She said she just could not get enough of reading and doing math and learning. But they don't know the ways of how to, like, hire a lawyer or, to start the ball rolling to try to fix this, And, but she had applied for college, and she was getting housing, and she was getting, like, some government assistance to help her with college. So hopefully, at least her story will turn out good. And, I don't know. But anyway, I appreciate everybody for sticking around, and that's just my little thoughts and opinions about this story, and I hope it works out for them. I hope that the 2020 and their investigators will bring this to light to somebody's eyesight that will say, hey, let's look into this, Thanks for watching.